Empathy is a gift, but it also turned me into a shapeshifter. Here's how human design helped me stop abandoning myself and attract a passionate and secure relationship. My name is Brianna McWilliam, and I am a licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist and attachment coach. I've spent more than 20 years helping adults struggling with insecure attachment styles cultivate happy and healthy relationships. And today, we're going to talk about the wonderful and mystical world of human design and extend a special offer for you with the expert guidance of Dr. Karen Curry Parker. So be sure to stick with me until the end. But first, here is what we are going to explore in this segment and workshop I did on human design. What is human design and why should you care? How does human design complement and evolve what we understand about attachment styles in relationships? And how I applied human design to my own life and relationships, taking me from struggling with disorganized attachment and topsy-turvy relationships to harnessing my own emotional energy and attracting and cultivating a secure and passionate relationship with my husband. And so by the end of this segment, you will have been introduced to a system that will help you tap into your own body's wisdom and intuition, harnessing a practical strategy for clear boundary setting and decision making to improve the quality of your life and relationships. So let's dive in. I am excited to have you today. We're going to be doing something a little bit different than I normally do. Human design is a system that basically talks about the way we organize our energy. And I want to talk about how I think this complements and evolves what we understand about attachment styles and how we apply that in our lives. So, what is human design and why does it matter? So, as I said, it is a system that maps how your energy processes life, connects with others, and makes decisions as you move through the world. So you might think of this as like a user guide for your capacities and your decision-making abilities. It also offers a strategy for knowing when you should act, when you should say yes, when you should say no, and when you should wait, right? Not yet. And I believe that attachment theory tends to show us these universal patterns of how we bond with others, whereas human design adds a lot of nuance within those patterns. I would have you think about your attachment style as like the way that you drive, your style of driving on the road, right? And maybe you're someone who tends to tap the brakes a little too often, or maybe you tend to travel a little bit slower in the travel lane, or maybe you're someone who tailgates in the fast lane because you're afraid of losing contact or falling behind or something like that. That would be like your attachment style. Now, human design, on the other hand, describes the car that you're actually driving, right? Is it a responsive sports car, like quick bursts, right? And it likes open lanes? Or is it more of like a steady hybrid that does best at a smooth, even pace on autopilot? Or is it a powerful truck or utility vehicle that needs more time and space to pivot and turn, right? So the idea is that when we know our driver's habits and we know the design, shape, make, and model of the car, then we stop flooring a vehicle that is built for cruising. We stop judging a quick engine for not being calm enough, right? And we're able to drive the car with more skill and compassion. So you start choosing relationships where your energy is met rather than drained, and you know better how to suss that out. You're able to pace things like conversations so that you can feel at ease in your nervous system. And you're able to recognize and honor natural cycles of rest and stimulation for your energy levels, instead of forcing yourself to have to be on all the time or at a high energy level. If you want to know what your body map is, I am going to put a little link in the chat, and I will also include this in the replay, caption of the replay. Yes. So when you click on the link, it's going to take you to this page. You're just going to drop in your name and email address. And then after you submit that, you're going to land on this thank you page. And if you scroll down to the third option, you can enter in your information in order to get your human design body chart. So, and it's just your birth date, time, location, like as if you were looking up your zodiac sign. And once you enter in that information, it's going to give you a body chart that looks like this. Okay. And this chart basically indicates how energy inherently moves through your body. Then we can drop into the body and access what human design would say is your ultimate authority. And you can use your recommended strategy to do that. So, for example, in my chart, you have what's called a profile, and then you will have the illustration of the different energy centers in your body. Now, you might notice it looks a little bit like the Hindu chakras, right? The chart of a chart of the Hindu chakras. And so in human design, they believe that the Hindu chakra system evolved into having 9 embodied chakras as opposed to 7 main embodied chakras. So in my case, my type is called manifesting generator. And then I also have what's called a profile number, which is a 4-6. And that means that I have a certain archetype that through which I express my auric type, meaning through which I express the energy you see here on this body map. So if you have a sacral authority, meaning there's a certain aspect of your chart that is charged with making decisions more so than others, it means that your sacral is defined. So that means I have a very quick yes or no to things. I kind of know right away if I stop trying to figure it out with my head and I drop a question into my body, there will be a quick yes or no response to everything that I draw into my experience. And because I have a sacral authority, it's going to come up like a sound. So it will probably be like, mm-hmm, mm-mm, ugh, ugh, huh, hmm, yeah, hmm. So that will be like my first response to something, huh? And that's coming up from my sacral. I want to listen to that first response. So how do I see this as an evolution of attachment styles? Because that's my wheelhouse, right? So the attachment theory kind of sets up this system whereby if you don't identify yourself as secure, then every other style needs to move towards that goal, which means that secure people are already where you want to be and everybody else is just on the way there, right? And I don't really accept that as a concept or a paradigm. I think that we are all secure. We are all just coping with different degrees of what human design would call conditioning in what we have taken on. And so in human design, the ideas would be that you would want to decondition your energy to simply move into alignment with what is, let's say, the highest possibility for your energy. So for a long time, I was really an emotional energy shifter or shapeshifter. I have an open emotional solar plexus. And so I would say yes when my body was saying no. I would lower my voice or soften my tone to keep the peace. I would confuse compassion with compliance or unconditional love with basically self-abandonment. And I would let my head overrule what my body was trying to tell me. And so when I started looking at human design and I got into it by reading the book on an introduction to quantum human design by Dr. Karen Curry Parker, I'm going to tell you a little more about in a minute. And once I got into working with human design, that just created a much more compassionate way of looking at what I was experiencing. So what does it mean to have an open emotional solar plexus? So on the slide here, you'll see I've circled this little triangle over here. And basically, I think of this as like our mood and emotional center. It's considered an awareness center and a motor, which means we are directly aware of emotion, and it also generates energy that compels us to act. So when you have what's called when this is open and on a chart, it just simply means it's not colored in, right? But when it's closed, that means it's colored in. It's another word you would use is defined. So it's a defined center. When you have an open center, that means that you don't have an inherent consistent way of processing that energy. When it is defined, that means you have an inherent, consistent way of processing that energy. I've also heard open centers referred to as wounds of wisdom, that wherever you have an open center, typically there are there are lessons you are learning in your life that eventually become the wisdom that you have to impart. So if you have a defined solar plexus, so for instance, if this was colored in, then that would be the most assertive decision center. That would be my authority. So I would not be here to make snap yes, no decisions. I would be here to ride an emotional wave first, to go through the feelings that arise around that decision, and then come back to a state of baseline or neutral and make my decision, right? Now, because it's open, my baseline is neutral, but when I come in contact, particularly with other people who have defined centers, I can absorb that energy. I can take in their feelings, and their feelings can become amplified within me. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm stealing their energy. Instead, it's more like a solar panel, right? You put up a solar panel on your roof, you're absorbing the sunlight and it's powering your home, but you're not detracting from the sun's energy, right? So these open centers kind of function like solar panels, and that energy can grow inside of you. So part of the wisdom is learning, because there's not an inherent way of modulating that. Part of the journey is learning systems by which you will learn to modulate it more intentionally, consciously, right? And that makes sense for me. Here I am teaching people about how to deal with their emotions and through different frameworks and systems. So we might say, in that sense, I am aligned with what the assignment might be for having an open emotional solar plexus. And so the work here is really being able to discern what is yours, what are you picking up on, retracing your steps, noticing the inputs, what energy are you taking on, and then being intentional about clearing that if it doesn't belong to you. The other thing that I think is really kind of cool about this system is that when you look at your partner's chart, it can right away tell you where you're going to be drawn to them and why, and also where you might experience friction and why. Now, obviously, there's a lot that could be said about what's on the screen right here, but I'm just going to share my husband and my combined chart and two channels that I think stand out in our relationship. So in my relationship, for instance, you have on the chart here, you'll see there are these little lines. These are called the numbers in the energy centers are called gates. You might think of these as like little doors that open and close and let energy in and energy out, right? And then you see these little channels that connect the centers to each other. Now you'll notice, so this is my chart over here. So you'll notice, for instance, that I have half of that channel is colored in and half of that channel is colored in. And if you come on over to my husband's chart, half of that channel is colored in and half of that channel is colored in. These are called hanging gates. So when we get together, this body graph forms. So this is the graph of our relationship, so to speak, me layered on top of him and vice versa. And so I'm going to tell you about those two hanging gates, because when you have two hanging gates coming together, that's what they call electromagnetic chemistry. So this is when you feel intense attraction to someone. Um, and so, in the attachment lingo, we talk about intense attraction as stemming from the nervous system recognizing something that feels familiar, something that feels like home, like an old sort of program that's running on repeat, hoping to relive in order to revise old wounds, shadow aspects of ourselves being mirrored back to us. And I believe all of that to be true. But with human design now, we are here looking at the whole circuitry of that. And I think also it can explain some of those scenarios where it's a bit inexplicable because I've come across that too, where it's like, I don't know what's going on. Sometimes you can just walk into the room and feel it. And that is when you might have two hanging gates matching up. So the first gate is this channel right here, and that's between my root chakra. And over here, this is in human design, they call this the spleen, but it's basically an intuition, instinct and intuition center. And so the channel that our relationship combines with this intense chemistry is the channel of transformation. And so this channel is all about material growth, taking wise risks, and forming strategic alliances. And basically, my gate is about ambition and his gate is about instinct. Okay. And so my ambition brings a lot of drive to improve, and to move things forward. His channel brings continuity. So it brings in an instinct for not just moving forward, but moving forward with what will actually endure. And it has a sense of timing, and it has a sense of knowing what paths are going to be worth it. And so in our chemistry, my ambition kind of brings the engine, brings the motor supply, and he is supplying the radar, right? He's the one who's kind of like has the steering wheel. And so together, we are able to spot the ladders that we might want to climb and make smart decisions that lead to steady outcomes in the realms of building a life together. So that could mean good work opportunities, long-range plans, long-term investments, things like that. But with this channel, things that we would need to watch out for is I might be someone who pushes a little too hard. And he might be someone who plays it a little too safe. And that's definitely played out in our relationships. So it can be this kind of push-pull between pressure and caution. Now, the second channel I think is kind of interesting is 2750, and it's the next one up here that connects the sacral to the intuition center. And this is considered a channel of preservation. It's all about nurturance, shared rules that keep the tribe healthy. So the system that we are creating, the family unit that we are creating. And so my channel is about nourishment. It's about offering care, and also feeding what you love. And his channel is the Gate 50, and that's all about values. So it's about applying to that certain rules and ethics and boundaries that keep the care sustainable. And so, in terms of our chemistry, I naturally want to tend to the relationship, and he naturally wants to define what good care looks like and what responsibilities we should share. And I'm laughing because it's just so spot on in our relationship. And so when we bring those two energies together in their highest expression, then that builds good routines. It raises the standards for quality of life in our relationship. And we both have a vested interest in protecting what matters, with respect to the growth of the relationship over the long term. So in our relationship, we have to be very careful about slipping into parentifying each other, right? Who's the caretaker and who's the rule setter? And realizing that even though we may have an inclination towards one or the other, we have to make sure that it is equitable in the way that we approach those dynamics. Well, thank you everyone for joining me here and going through this journey with human design. I'd love to know in the chat, is this interesting to you? Have you ever heard of human design before? And also, you can get your own chart through that link. I'll put that there again. And this is what I'm excited to share with you is that when I got into human design, I discovered Dr. Karen Curry Parker's book, which was Introduction to Quantum Human Design. And so she is an expert in the realm of human design. She came up with her own language for it, which is quantum human design. And I find it to be a very compassionate model. And she has her own courses and whatnot. But what was really exciting for me, and I think a real universal wink, was she has a relationship coaching certification program that I've always wanted. And so I reached out to her and I asked if she would like to collaborate with me, and she said yes. Yay. So my hero in human design has agreed to collaborate with me to do a presentation on this on Monday, November 10th. And I will send out the replay of this presentation with a link to join us. And she's the expert, and she's going to go into talking about how human design allows us to really get in touch with the wisdom of our body, and specifically looking at how that can inform our boundaries and also can inform our sense of alignment and purpose. So it's going to be on Monday, November 10th. That's at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, New York time. And I think you're really going to love it. This is going to be a lot of fun for me, but I think if you enjoyed this presentation and you feel like you have questions, definitely come to our presentation because it's going to be a lot of fun. Um, and I will send out, there was a question about the recording. I'm going to send out the replay for this one to my list, so you will have access to that. Thank you. Thank you for joining. And so if you have any other questions or anything, I'll hang out for another minute or two or reflections, and then we will bring our call today to a close.